Today on Across the Fence, as the boating season winds down, we'll get a photographer's view of Lake Champlain. And Vermonters take a tour to see and learn about farming and conservation. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. A recent agricultural tour through Addison County helped highlight efforts by Vermont farmers to improve water quality. Lawmakers, policymakers, and representatives from state and federal agencies got a first-hand look at the work of farmers in the Mackenzie Brook watershed. The Agriculture Conservation Tour was organized by the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, the Otter Creek Natural Resources Conservation District, the Champlain Valley Farmer Coalition, and UVM Extension. Here's Extension agronomy expert Jeff Carter.
This is the Addison County Conservation Tour. We have a bus tour going on with probably about 40 participants from around the state. We like to bring in policymakers, folks in politics, just farmers who are interested, Middlebury College students.
Basically nip the tops so that they get the very best.
Well, the goal from this is that, first of all, a conversation between people who might not normally sit together on a bus, talking about water quality issues in Addison County, in particular right here, the Mackenzie Brook watershed, the Lake Champlain watershed, talking to each other and learning who each other are. Farmers talking to policymakers, heads of agencies talking again to their neighbors who are farmers, and given a nice common focal point where they can come back and ask questions again. People are still very interested in agriculture. They're still very interested to come out and see what's happening on farms. They just need the opportunity to come out to farms in a way that they can learn. And this is a great opportunity here because it's a very informative, educational view, and we get to talk to the farmers, and the farmers can tell us what they're doing without us prompting them. And we pick farms because of what they're doing. They're just being good farmers.
This is about talking to partners, finding out what's working, hearing from them while I'm out in the field. Sometimes when there's the whole ivory tower mentality that the state conservationists, so you can't approach them. I want to be approachable. I want to hear from the partners. I want to hear from the farmers, most of all, in terms of what's working well for them. And I have to admit, there's a little bit of checking up to make sure that my staff is, getting along well with the farmers as well as our partners out in the field. Every year we have about $10 to $12 million of Environmental Quality Incentives Program funds, or our EQIP program is what we commonly call it. And each year we adapt our policies a little bit, tweak them to make them more useful for the farmers and actually more functional in terms of their effect on the environment. We're out here trying to improve resource conditions, so protect the soil from erosion, improve water quality, limit the amount of manure that might be running off these farm fields. And so when I see practices in place or things that may not be working as well, I'm able to look at those policies at a leadership level and say, what if we tried this instead? And that's how I use the information that I get from these tours to affect my job back at our state office.
Small grains before, so that was pretty great.
My job, I do two things. I bring things back for the senator and for my colleagues in Washington who work directly on some of the policy issues. So seeing what's taking place, what it is that works for the farmers in implementing conservation practices, what the needs are in among folks like UVM Extension and NRCS and some of the other programs that support the farmers. I just collect a lot of information about what's working, what isn't, where the needs are for additional financial or technical support, maybe what needs to be fixed in the Farm Bill to make the program so smoother. I can take all that back. What I might bring out here a bit is to answer any questions people have related to federal programs, access to those programs, and so just kind of a back and forth conversation. With the next Farm Bill being written, we do a Farm Bill every 5 years, and the next one needs to be written in the next Congress starting in 2017 through 2018. So I've got a list of things that really kind of need to be fixed to make the USDA programs work better for farmers, and this trip has already reinforced and added a couple to that list. I'm always impressed with how how many things farmers have going on, and they just got so much to keep track of. If they change something on a pasture, it affects their animal health. Their animal health affects that pasture. They've got to get everything scheduled really tightly. They depend on people coming and going, and that drives home for me that rolling out the federal dollars really needs to be as straightforward and simple as possible if farmers are going to be able to utilize those programs, because it's just one of 1,000 things they have to do. And so it reinforces with me that we've got to make these programs accessible to the farmers with a minimum of bureaucratic requirements, and make sure that NRCS has the staff to get out and UVM Extension to get out and help deliver the programs, because a federal dollar that Senator Leahy helps bring to Vermont doesn't do anybody any good if that dollar sits unspent, because it's just too hard to get access to, and ultimately goes back to the federal treasury at the end of a year.
So those were all reasons we went no-till.
Things are changing fairly quickly, and just to get out here in the fall and see rather than fields that were just turned over dirt where we're harvesting corn, a lot of those fields are green in late September, early October. We've got fields that are greening up already, those are the cover crops. And the landscape just looks a little different than it did even 5 years ago. And so the programs are having impacts, the farmers are being engaged, and so just seeing that firsthand is important.
As part of the tour, the Otter Creek Natural Resources Conservation District bestowed its Conservation Farmer of the Year award to John Lucas of Lucas Cattle Company of Orwell and Benson, and to Will Madison of Madison Family Farm in Shoreham. Our next segment gives you the opportunity to be a farmer if you want to grow mushrooms. Keith Silva tells us about a business in Morristown that's moving mushrooms to the market.
Alien and strange, and yet familiar and earthy. Mushrooms are as unique as they are common. And they taste good too. Well, at least some people think so.
People are like, oh my God, I love mushrooms. Or they're like, ugh, I hate mushrooms. So you never find anybody that says like, they're lukewarm. Either you hate them or love them.
Where's the spawn, sweetheart? You want to get the spawn,
Monica Gallardo and her husband Jason Bednarz own Motown Mushrooms in Morristown. Bednarz is a jack of all trades. A carpenter and sometimes chef, he started growing gourmet mushrooms as a hobby and selling his crop to his fellow chefs. It didn't take long before demand exceeded supply.
Chefs always like the weirdest thing they can put on the plate, and so at least the better ones. And so if you can show them a product they've never seen before, or even better, their customers have never seen before, you get this wow factor. And so they're always interested in not only fresh and local, but completely new flavors and textures. As a carpenter, I often get slow come January, and usually when that happens, I launch into projects. And so the project that year was to build my flow hood and my big sterilizer to step up the mushroom growing game.
Growing mushrooms breaks down into two categories: propagation and cultivation. The flow hood Bednarz built in his basement allows him to work in a sterile, lab-like setting and produce specific varieties of mushrooms like oyster, lion's mane, and hen of the woods.
We start with Petri dish, which is agar medium, which is a nutrient medium, which allows the mushroom mycelium to grow, and that's sterile. As the mycelium grows, I check for contaminants. Once I have clean mycelium, I go to this sterilized grain, and that allows the mushroom mycelium to propagate out from the inoculation points and colonize the substrate. This I can expand into 10 more jars, and so I keep making what are called generations of grain spawn, and they get bigger by a factor of say 8 to 10 every time I expand it. And so it's a series of expansions, and you start with a small speck of mycelium and you grow it out to its physical limits, and then you use it to fruit mushrooms.
Saw something, an off-colored brown in here.
There's at least 10,000 species of mushrooms, and it's a constant process to learn more and more species.
Terry Delaney teaches the biology of fungi at the University of Vermont. Across the Fence followed Delaney on a mushroom foraging field trip a few years ago. The connection between fungi and humans goes back centuries to a time when mushrooms were considered the food of the gods.
There are documented fungi in the form of stone carvings from thousands of years ago. In fact, the Egyptian pharaohs even apparently consumed mushrooms. In fact, they were privileged to be the people who could consume mushrooms in their society.
Foraging for wild mushrooms continues to be a tried and true practice for finding favorite fungi. But commercial mushroom production has also ramped up in recent years because of how easy and profitable it is to grow mushrooms.
Many species of mushrooms are very easy to cultivate, and the oyster mushroom is a good example. It will grow on almost anything. I even saw a fella grow some mushrooms on an old t-shirt that he had inoculated. So that particular mushroom grows very well. It's also a very effective decay fungus in the forest, and we'll find that on decaying logs.
Oyster mushrooms have become the meat and potatoes of Motown Mushroom's business plan, thanks in part to the FungiPail. Bednarz and Gallardo developed this grow-your-own kit, which packs mycelium and 8 pounds of pasteurized straw into a 2.5-gallon pail at $29.99.
Everything that the mushroom needs to grow is inside. In fact, by the time you get it, it's already well on its way to producing its first crop of mushrooms. So the mycelium will colonize that substrate, and when it finds the holes, it senses the light and the fresh air, and it'll begin to produce little baby mushrooms, which will rapidly expand over about a week to full size. And so, I mean, it's pretty hard. Our biggest problem with it is actually keeping them from fruiting before we can get them to the customer, because they are like little biological bombs. They will produce mushrooms no matter pretty much what you do over about 3 weeks from when you make it. And I've had friends that forget them in the trunk of their car, in their closet, and they've erupted into giant mushrooms.
The FungiPails allow Bednarz and Gallardo to spread their love of mushrooms and to teach people how to grow their own food.
People are really looking to get first local foods, foods that are like really beneficial for you, and also they support small business. The fact that you can grow it your own, and you know that these mushrooms don't have any pesticides, they don't have any byproducts, anything like weird being added to them. You know where your food is coming from. I think people find that very valuable. We love teaching people how to grow their own mushrooms, teaching them about the advantages of consuming your own food. I love it. I never thought that I was going to be a mushroom farmer. If you asked me 10 years ago, I would be like, what? But I'm really into it now, and we really love it.
Watching mushrooms grow is still exciting even after all this time. It's so fast, they're so alien, they're so amazing in flavor. They're ridiculously efficient at converting cellulose into protein, which is like one of the big problems in nature, is what do you do with this woody cellulose material? And if it wasn't for mushrooms, we'd be buried in leaves and logs that never rot. And so they're this integral, poorly understood part of of nature, and it's great to be able to get in there and monkey around with it and experiment and see what does what.
From pails, on logs, or in the wild, fungi are apt to mushroom just about anywhere. What can we say? Fungi are fun and delicious. Well, maybe. In Morristown, I'm Keith Silva for the Crescent Times.
You can find out more about Motown Mushrooms by visiting their website, motownmushrooms.com, or you can call the company at 802-851-8222. Our final segment today takes us out on the water of Lake Champlain. As the weather turns colder and the days get shorter, Across the Fence intern Dylan Deloge spent some time on the water, taking in a beautiful afternoon of boating on the lake. Enjoy.